If I killed someone just to be loved, do I deserve forgiveness? Her voice didn't echo. It didn't need to. She asked the question without moving her lips, her eyes locked with mine, shimmering like twin oceans beneath a foreign sky. It wasn't telepathy, and it wasn't language either. It was something older, primal, instinctive. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Rain dripped from the edge of her chin. Her red dress clung to her frame, soaked, heavy, defeated. The glowing collar around her neck pulsed faintly, like a dying heartbeat. Mira. I hadn't heard that name in 2 years. I had buried it alongside everything else I tried to forget. And yet here she was. She stood for only a moment, enough for the image to etch itself into my memory forever. Then she collapsed. A limp fall, silent, terrifyingly human. The sound of her body hitting the wet rocks was softer than I expected, almost like she had surrendered herself to gravity long ago. I ran to her, slipping down the moss-slick slope, hands trembling. My knee cracked against stone, but I didn't feel it. I dropped beside her, pressing 2 fingers to her throat. Faint pulse. Weak, but real. She was alive. Her skin blue-gray, cold as ice. Her lips slightly parted, revealing the tips of canines not quite human. The red around her was not all fabric. Blood had soaked the dress, merging with the water around her, swirling into the current like diluted ink. The collar. My eyes locked onto it. It was still active. Still controlling her, torturing her from within. The same tech we used during the war, designed to suppress neural independence in hybrids like her. I helped build the prototypes. God help me. Her hand moved. Just barely. Fingers twitching. She was trying to say something. I leaned closer, catching a whisper between breaths. Elias. It hit me like a slug to the stomach. The way she said my name like it hurt to remember me. My name used to mean safety to her. Now it sounded like a wound. How had it come to this? Mira, who once pressed her forehead to mine in the silence of the detention cells, who once gave me that red scrap of fabric to tie around my wrist, the last piece of her people's sacred right of trust. And I, in return, betrayed her. Not by choice, but by cowardice. By inaction. By staying quiet when they took her away. I had spent 2 years convincing myself she hadn't survived. That lie had kept me breathing. This truth might stop my heart. She convulsed. Her body arched unnaturally, then collapsed again. I ripped off my jacket and threw it over her, shielding her from the rain that didn't care she was dying. My fingers hovered over the collar, itching to tear it off, but I knew better. One wrong move and it would flood her brain with so much pain it would burn her from the inside. I needed tools. I needed power. I needed time. I had none of those things. Just her, dying in my arms, and the question still echoing inside me. If she killed, just to be loved. I lifted her slowly, gently. Her head lolled against my chest, strands of dark, wet hair trailing across my arm. Every step I took up the slope felt heavier than the last, not just from her weight, but from mine. The weight of guilt. Of memory. Back at the outpost, I laid her down on the emergency bed, cut away the wet fabric, cleaned the wound as best I could. A clean slice. Sharp. Self-inflicted? Or a struggle? I didn't know. She didn't fight when I touched her, but she didn't reach for me either. Her eyes barely opened, like she wasn't sure whether I was real or worse, didn't care. "Stay with me," I whispered, uselessly. I watched the pulse at her neck. Slow. Fading. Her lips moved again. No sound. But I understood. She mouthed the word. Why? Not to herself. Not to the world. To me. Why hadn't I come for her? Why had I let them take her? Why was I only here now, with blood on her dress and rain in her lungs? There were no answers. Only the truth I had tried to bury. Because I was afraid. Because I was a coward. Because I didn't believe she could survive. And now, seeing her like this, I wasn't sure I could survive her survival. I wiped the rain from her face, gently, as if that could erase what we'd become. Her fingers grazed mine. A reflex? A goodbye? No. She was still fighting. She didn't want to die. Or maybe, she didn't want to die alone. I took the red scrap of fabric from my pocket. I had kept it, all these years. Tied it around my wrist once again. Her gaze flickered to it. Recognition. A tear slipped from her eye, lost in the rest of the water. But I saw it. I saw her. And for the first time since I found her, she stopped shaking. That was the beginning. That was the moment I knew Mira didn't come back to be rescued. She came back to ask the question I never wanted to face. And her answer was everything this story would become. She didn't scream when she woke up. That would have been easier. Something sharp, something clear. A scream would have given me a path. A direction. But Mira didn't scream, she recoiled. As if my presence burned. The moment her eyes fluttered open, her body jerked back like lightning through water. Her arms hit the edge of the cot, legs kicking into empty space, breath caught in her throat. I raised my hands slowly, palms open, the way I would approach a wounded animal. And that's exactly what she looked like, wounded, cornered, and afraid. Mira, I said, barely a whisper. She stared at me. Not with recognition, at least not the kind I wanted. There was something else in her gaze, a buried memory clawing its way to the surface. She saw me, yes, but not just me. She saw everything that came with my face, the prison walls, the sound of boots, the cold metal table where they strapped her down. My face was a trigger. My voice was the sound of everything she'd tried to forget. Her body shook. The collar around her neck flickered as if feeding on her fear. I moved an inch closer and she convulsed, hands seizing, spine arching in pain. I froze. Every instinct told me to help, to touch her, to do something, anything. But every action was the wrong one. So I stood there, helpless, watching her suffer. The outpost hadn't changed much. Dust-covered control panels. Medical supplies that expired a decade ago. An old cot and a flickering lamp. It was the place I had chosen to disappear after the war, half hospital, half graveyard. But for a moment, it became something else, the only place on earth where she might survive. When the convulsions passed, Mira lay still. Not asleep. Not unconscious. Just still. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. Her fingers gripped the sheet as though afraid it might be taken from her. Her eyes drifted toward the ceiling, never to me. It was then, as I stood there in that stale, humming silence, that the memories came flooding back. Not as scenes. As wounds. The first time I saw her, she was in a holding cell. She wasn't the first hybrid I had encountered, but something about her was different. She didn't flinch. She didn't plead. She simply sat there, head bowed, hands folded in her lap like someone waiting for a storm to pass. I had been assigned to check her vitals, gather data. Nothing personal. But the moment I opened the cell door, she looked up and I stopped breathing. Not because of her beauty. That's too simple, too shallow. It was something else. A stillness. A sadness so old it didn't belong in someone that young. She didn't speak for days. I tried everything: gentle questioning, silence, even music. She ignored me, until one night, during a power outage, I found her standing by the bars, eyes reflecting the dim emergency light. "You keep trying," she said. That was all. But it was the beginning. Over time, words turned into conversations. Conversations into laughter. Laughter into something that shouldn't have existed between us, understanding. The kind that happens when two people see their reflection in someone they are not supposed to trust. One night, when the wind howled like ghosts outside the facility, she gave me a small piece of cloth. Red. Torn. Frayed. She placed it in my palm and closed my fingers around it. "Where I come from," she said, "we give this to someone we trust to hold our name when we can't." I never asked what that meant. I didn't have to. That piece of fabric became a heartbeat in my pocket. A secret I carried in silence. Back in the present, I took it out again. I had kept it all these years, even after they told me she was gone. Even after I told myself to move on. She didn't look at it now. Or at me. She just lay there, caught between pain and memory. "Mira," I tried again. "You're safe." A mistake. Her head turned slowly. Just slightly. Then, finally, her eyes met mine. Safe. That one word lived in her expression, but not in belief. It lived in bitterness. In disbelief. Her lip trembled. Not from fear but from something far crueler, disappointment. She had trusted me. And I had let her be taken. Let them put that thing on her. Let her vanish into systems and shadows. I sat down in a chair beside her bed and folded the red cloth into a square, laying it gently on the table. Letting it speak for me. Her eyes flit to it. A pause. Then a breath. Shaky. Shallow. But it meant something. I never stopped looking, I said, though I wasn't sure it was true. She didn't respond. And maybe she didn't need to. Because silence, in the right context, says more than words ever can. She closed her eyes again, not in fear this time, but exhaustion. The kind that doesn't come from the body, but from carrying too many memories. The kind of tired that seeps into your soul. I didn't touch her. I didn't try. I just sat there, watching her sleep, wondering how many nights I had done the same thing in dreams I refused to admit I had. This wasn't rescue. This wasn't redemption. This was consequence. And maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something we didn't have words for yet. Because there are some things love cannot save. But maybe it can hold the hand of what's left behind. I spent the next 2 hours trying to hack the collar. Old training manuals, schematics, fragments of stolen code. I pulled everything from the wreckage of memory and desperation. The tech was advanced even by war standards, a bio-linked neural restraint designed to suppress rebellion in hybrids. It didn't just control the body. It rewrote the way the mind reacted to certain memories. And right now, that mind was dying. Mira lay still. The only sound in the room was her breathing, shallow, labored, too slow. Every time I moved close, her body twitched, the collar glowing faintly like a silent scream. I spoke gently. Tried to soothe her. But she never responded. She was somewhere else now. Someplace I couldn't follow. Locked inside her own brain. I wired a makeshift scanner into an old AI panel, rerouting the interface through a rusted translator core. Static hissed back. The collar's code had no access ports. It was sealed. Closed. So I did what I had sworn never to do again. I called the network. The signal bounced off satellites, encrypted, deep root. It led to a dark node I used once before during the war. The screen flickered. A face appeared. Not a face, really just shifting pixels. Genderless. Toneless. Artificial. Elias. You said you'd never reach out again. I lied. Obviously. I need data on a V-class neural collar. Hybrid lock. Custom coded. Possibly reactive to emotional memory. You're talking about Series VAE12. Illegal. Dangerous. Unhackable. But not untraceable. A pause. Pixels shimmered. Data flowed. There is no safe way to remove it. There has to be. Listen to me, the AI said. The collar doesn't just suppress memory, it anchors pain to identity. You are the memory she is most emotionally connected to. And that connection is being used against her. Meaning, every time she remembers you, the system triggers a neurological shock. You're saying I'm killing her? Not you. The love she had for you. The trust. The betrayal. All those feelings are loops now. And the collar treats them as threats. I stood frozen. The air felt heavier. My stomach turned. Can I shut it down? If you disrupt the emotional memory anchor, yes. And how do I do that? Kill the source. I stared at the screen. You mean me? Or her feelings for you? But considering the structure, it's too late for that. The neural pattern has set. Elias, you have to understand. I cut the line. The silence after felt like a verdict. I turned to her. Mira. Still breathing. Still shaking slightly. And in that moment, I realized I couldn't touch her. Couldn't speak her name. Couldn't let her look at me. Because to her body, to the programming, I was poison. But I couldn't leave either. Because to her soul, I was still something else. A shadow moved. Her hand. She opened her eyes. Looked at me, not with fear, not with hate. Something quieter. Something harder to survive. Acceptance. I stepped back. She took a breath. Her mouth moved. At first, no sound. Then barely. I know. Her voice. Her real voice. Not filtered by the collar. Not broken by tremors. She tried again. Clearer. Raw. I know I have to die. I couldn't breathe. She turned her head to the side, eyes closing again. A tear rolled down her cheek, disappearing into the hollow between her jaw and the collar. No, I said, stumbling forward, gripping the edge of the bed like it was the only thing keeping me upright. No, we'll find another way. I'll shut it off. Her hand reached out, weak but steady. She touched my chest, just once. Not to stop me. Not to comfort me. Just to say, I already tried. She had already made peace with it. But I hadn't. I dropped to my knees beside her, trembling. I'm sorry, I whispered. I'm sorry for not coming sooner. For letting them take you. For thinking forgetting you would protect you. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The silence between us had changed. Not empty. Not angry. Just final. I pressed my forehead to her hand. The collar blinked softly. Still alive. Still counting down. I had minutes. Hours at best. So I stayed there. Holding her hand. Listening to the rhythm of her breathing. Trying to memorize it. Because that, too, would become memory. And it was all I had left to save. It was raining again. Not a storm, not a downpour, just that kind of rain that feels like memory. Quiet. Relentless. Soft enough to miss, heavy enough to drown you over time. I had stepped outside the outpost for 5 minutes. 5. Maybe to clear my head. Maybe to breathe without choking on guilt. Maybe because I couldn't stand to watch her die in real time. When I came back, the bed was empty. The blanket, twisted. The cot, stained with red. Not the raw splash of trauma, no. This was precise. Intentional. There was blood, yes. But it had purpose. Then I saw the trail. Drops. Small. Almost apologetic. Leading toward the back door, where the rain slid through the open frame like someone too polite to knock. And there, in the doorway, I saw her. Mira was standing. Barefoot. Pale. Shaking. Her hands were red. Her fingers trembling. But her posture steady. The kind of steadiness that comes only after the decision has already been made. She didn't look at me. Her hand gripped the collar, her nails coated in her own blood. One side of the device had been pried open, the wires exposed, fragile and glowing. Her skin beneath was torn cut with whatever piece of metal she'd found. I didn't know how she managed it. The pain alone should have paralyzed her. Mira. She turned. Her eyes were calm. It broke me. Because she wasn't afraid. Wasn't angry. She looked at me like someone looks at the ocean one last time before stepping into the tide. She pressed something. A soft click. Then the light in the collar blinked, stuttered and went out. I ran. I caught her as her knees gave out. Her body collapsed into mine like she had always belonged there, like the final piece of gravity in a world too fractured to hold her. Blood on my shirt. Rain in my eyes. She smiled. The first time. The only time. Her hand reached up, slowly, almost weightless. She touched my arm, searching. Then her fingers closed around my wrist. Around the red cloth still tied there. And with the gentleness of a farewell, she untied it. Then hands shaking, breath thin, she tied it back. But not on herself. Not on me. Between us. She wrapped it around both our wrists. A knot. A promise. A goodbye. And then her head fell forward, resting against my chest. Her pulse was weak. Each beat a whisper. I held her tighter. As if I could squeeze life back in. As if grief could rewind time. Don't die again, I whispered into her hair, my voice barely audible beneath the rain. Don't make me save you. One more time. Her lips moved. I leaned closer. One word. Free. Then, nothing. No sound. No movement. No resistance. Just her, finally still. The rain stopped some time after. I didn't notice. I sat there, holding her, long after her warmth had faded. It wasn't dramatic. There were no alarms. No explosions. No light from the heavens. Just silence. And the red thread binding two broken wrists. I buried her near the outpost. Beneath a tree she once pointed at through the window, saying it reminded her of home not because it looked the same, but because it stood alone. I marked the grave with a piece of stone. No name. No date. Just a folded cloth, red and worn, wrapped around the base. A wind passed through the clearing, soft and cold. I looked up, not for signs, not for messages, but because I wanted her to know I was still listening. There was nothing I could say. There was nothing left to save. Only to remember. And remembering hurts less than forgetting. Sometimes. The years passed slowly, like snow collecting on a silent roof. Unnoticed. Uncelebrated. I stayed. The outpost had long since lost power, save for one console rewired, repurposed, stubborn. Each year, on the same day, at the same hour, I sent a signal. 3 tones. The same sequence that once made her smile. No words. Just tones. I didn't know if I believed in ghosts. But I believed in resonance. And somewhere out there, I hoped something still remembered her smile. The transmission took 7 seconds to bounce off the first relay. 12 to clear orbit. After that, it was math and mystery. I never expected a response. That wasn't the point. The point was to remember her not as she died but as she lived. With purpose. With clarity. With the stubbornness to smile even in pain. Each year, I waited 5 minutes. Then powered down the console. Until the 7th year. That night, the console chirped. Just once. I thought it was a fault. Maybe a static loop. I tapped the screen. No response. But the waveform on the lower display pulsed once, then twice, then a third time. 3 tones. Perfectly spaced. The air inside the room felt different. Tighter. Thinner. Then came the signal. It wasn't a voice. Not at first. It was data fragmented, scattered, trying to form. I patched in a backup receiver, scrambled for the old codec. The screen flickered to life. Static. Lines. Then, a shape. A child. A girl, maybe 6, maybe 7. Blue skin pale, not the same shade as Mira's, but close. Her eyes green-gray, reflective, too wide for her small face looked straight into the camera. She sat at a control panel, fingers hovering above the same kind of frequency console I had built years ago. And on her wrist tied with a gentle knot was a strip of red cloth. Old. Faded. Torn at the edges. My breath caught. She didn't speak. Just looked. Behind her, the lights blinked softly, indicating deep space travel. A star map rotated in slow motion. She tilted her head, as if waiting to see if the screen would speak back. Then she reached forward and pressed the button again. 3 tones. And then the transmission ended. The room was quiet. I stared at the screen long after it went dark. I didn't move. Didn't blink. I don't even remember breathing. Because in those seconds, every question I'd buried came clawing back. Was Mira alive? Had she left something behind? Had she sent this child? Or had this child found something Mira had left for her? I didn't know. Maybe I never would. But the signal had found me. The cloth had found its way home. And in the vast silence of a universe that had taken everything, something had spoken back. I leaned back in a chair. No tears came. Only warmth. And something close to peace. Not closure. Never closure. But connection. And for the first time in years, I whispered aloud. Thank you. Maybe the stars heard me. Maybe not. But the console blinked again. Just once. And it was enough. Some stories don't end. They just wait for an answer. In a universe filled with silence, sometimes all we need is one tone, one memory, one heartbeat calling back. Thank you for listening. If you felt something tonight, keep the signal alive. Until next time. This was UFO Love and Hate.